Joining me now is Daniel Benjamin. He is the former coordinator for counterterrorism at the U.S. State Department, and he's a former U.S. ambassador at large. Daniel Benjamin, thank you very much for joining me. Welcome.
My pleasure.
Let me ask you first, do you think that the Libyan government did not know? Were they not tipped off?
It's very hard to say. The early reports were that there had been consultations between the U.S. and Libya, and I know that we have talked about issues like this on many occasions. It's entirely possible that there were discussions. It's possible that they said, okay, we'll turn a blind eye, and that the public reaction was very negative. I think we have to take them at their word right now and say that they did not know about it.
Of course, CNN did interview the wife of al Libi, who said to our correspondent there that all she heard was Libyan voices when he was snatched. But let me ask you about what you just heard the Somali Foreign Minister, Deputy Prime Minister say, that she believes Somalia is pretty much free of the terrorist threat, that al-Shabaab is on the run, has lost morale, is on its last legs. Do you agree with that assessment? And what can you tell us about the al-Qaeda franchise and its strength in Africa, North Africa?
Well, I do agree with her that al-Qaeda is in decline. I'm sorry, al-Shabaab is in decline in Somalia, and that's quite clear from the fact that they were really routed by the African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM. And, al-Shabaab used to control Somalia, much of Somalia, including almost all of Mogadishu, except a few city blocks, and now it doesn't control anything in Mogadishu. That said, the group retains an ability to carry out terrorist operations in the region. It has a very hard time holding territory, and it's much weakened in that regard. But as we saw at the Westgate Mall, it's still able to carry out terrorist acts, and that is, of course, a big concern for everyone in the region. It's also important to note that countries like Kenya don't have very strong security, and so al-Shabaab can cause particularly damaging attacks.
So the other al-Qaeda franchises outside of Somalia, particularly those emanating from Libya, do you think that as we raise the question, is the United States shifting away from attacks from drones in the air to the unthinkable, boots on the ground? We've seen that they wanted to capture the al-Shabaab leader, according to the Pentagon, alive, so that they could presumably get intelligence from him. Do we see changing tactics?
There's been a strong desire to increase the number of captures and increase the amount of intelligence that we can glean from these operatives. You may remember that there was an operative named Warsami who was seized on the water in the area between Somalia and Yemen. There was a great deal of intelligence received from that set of interrogations, which I believe took almost 2 months. And so there's a really big incentive to do that again. I'm sure that if Washington decided to go ahead with what we would call a snatch operation, it was because they thought that it was doable and would have a big intelligence yield. You wouldn't put troops into harm's way unless you thought that you could achieve something like that. Now, having said that, I don't think other means of attack, means of strike, are out of consideration anymore. It simply means that this was going to work in these circumstances. And as we know, SEAL Team 6 was surprised by the amount of firepower they encountered and withdrew. Undoubtedly, they didn't want to have a huge firefight and a lot of casualties, and decided that this was the better way to go.
Let's just get back to al Libi for a moment. You said he's no doubt being interrogated. And then what? We hear that he could be taken to New York, where he's being indicted. And presumably, I suppose they're hoping that he's going to cooperate and there'll be some kind of not only intelligence boom, but a successful prosecution as well.
Well, there is an outstanding indictment for al Libi, and I don't think that the government would have any problem getting a conviction of him, even if he doesn't say anything. Others on the same charges have been convicted, and there is a mountain of evidence against him. However, it would be nice to get some of the intelligence from him on connections between Libya and the al-Qaeda core in Pakistan, some of the networks that exist across North Africa, what's going on in the federally administered tribal areas in Pakistan where he has deep roots. There's a lot to learn from this man, and there's the additional fact that the United States never lets these cases die, and it's very important to show that we're going to follow them to their conclusion and that justice will be done.
And that was clearly the message also, as well as the operation that the United States was trying to send this weekend. Daniel Benjamin, thank you so much for joining me.